King Solomon's temple. According to the Bible, it was one of the wonders of the ancient world, a house for God literally overflowing with wealth. We are talking walls lined with cedar and sacred objects forged from staggering amounts of gold and silver. But this legendary treasury would become the target of one of the most audacious heists in history, led by a powerful Egyptian pharaoh. The biblical account is dramatic and very clear. There is just one problem. When you go looking for Egypt's side of the story, the one they carved in stone to last forever, that epic heist is met with a deafening silence. The Bible tells us that in the 10th century BCE, the pharaoh Shishak marched his army into the kingdom of Judah. He tore through the fortified cities and eventually stood at the gates of Jerusalem. To save his city from being destroyed, Solomon's son, King Rehoboam, stripped the temple and his own palace of their treasures and simply handed them over. Shishak took it all, the famous golden shields of Solomon, the sacred vessels, a fortune you could barely imagine. This should have been the crowning achievement of a pharaoh's reign, something you would want to brag about on the walls of Egypt's greatest temples. But this is where the story gets really complicated. The primary Egyptian record of this campaign actually exists, but it leaves out the one detail that matters most: the conquest of Jerusalem and its legendary treasure. So why does it seem like this epic Bible heist was erased from Egyptian history? The biggest clue in this mystery is waiting in Egypt, at the colossal temple of Amun-Re at Karnak. On a massive gateway known as the Bubastite Portal, the pharaoh we now call Shoshenq-Puerd, who scholars are pretty sure is the biblical Shishak, carved his military victories in stone. The timing fits, the name is a near-perfect linguistic match, and for a long time this was celebrated as one of the first moments where the Bible and the history books dramatically lined up. The portal is a masterpiece of royal propaganda. You see Shoshenq smiting his enemies, while the god Amun-Re hands him lists of captured cities. Each city is shown as a prisoner bound by a rope that forms a ring or cartouche, with the city's name inside. There are more than 150 names here, basically a map of Shoshenq's campaign through the region. The list confirms he marched through both the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The evidence is right there in stone. But as archaeologists carefully translated the names, a shocking omission became clear. Megiddo is on the list, Tanakh is there, plenty of sites in Judah are there, but Jerusalem, the grand prize, the city whose treasury was supposedly emptied to fill the pharaoh's vaults, is completely missing. The biblical story is all about the plunder of Jerusalem, yet the Egyptian account, carved by the pharaoh himself, does not even mention it. This is not a small detail, it is a giant hole in the story. It is a conflict that has stumped archaeologists for nearly 200 years. Was the Bible wrong? Or are we missing a crucial piece of the puzzle? Now, one of the simplest explanations is also the most frustrating. The portal is damaged. 3,000 years of wind and sand have worn it down, and scholars figure about a third of the original names have been eroded into oblivion. It is totally plausible that Jerusalem was once in one of those broken sections, simply lost to time. It is the easiest answer, but it is definitely not the only one. Another fascinating clue was found hundreds of miles from Egypt, at the ancient site of Megiddo in northern Israel. There, archaeologists dug up a piece of a huge stone monument, a stele, stamped with the cartouche of Shoshenq I. This was a massive discovery. It proved Shoshenq's army was not just passing through, they were leaving behind victory markers. The stele at Megiddo, a city also on the Karnak list, is like a physical handshake between the Egyptian record and the facts on the ground. But this clue just makes the Jerusalem question even weirder. It confirms the campaign was real, but it still does not explain the silence. Some scholars, often called minimalists, argue that this lack of evidence points to a bigger issue. They suggest that maybe the great biblical kingdom of David and Solomon was not such a grand empire after all, but a smaller local power. In their view, 10th century Jerusalem was not a big enough deal to get a special shout-out on the pharaoh's victory list. The story of the plunder, they argue, could have been an exaggeration by later biblical authors trying to explain the end of Solomon's golden age. This skeptical view, however, has to deal with the fact that archaeologists have found destruction layers at other sites in Judah that date to this exact period, evidence of a massive military campaign. Some researchers even offer a creative rereading of the Karnak list. The famous Egyptologist Kenneth Kitchen, for example, argued that 2 badly damaged name rings could be pieced back together to read the Highlands of David, which might be a way of referring to the whole kingdom, even if the capital was not named. So we have a stone carving with a missing name, a monument that proves the invasion happened, and a huge debate between the Bible and the archaeological silence. But what if the answer is not in what was destroyed, but in what was saved? Before we get to the theory that might just solve this ancient heist, if you are enjoying this investigation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You do not want to miss our next dive into a historical mystery. Probably the best explanation for why Jerusalem is not on the Bubastite portal comes from a small but critical detail in the biblical story itself. If you look closely at the account in 2 Chronicles chapter 12, as Shishak's army approaches, a prophet gives a divine message. Seeing that King Rehoboam has humbled himself, God says, "I will not destroy them. My wrath shall not be poured out upon Jerusalem by the hand of Shishak. Nevertheless, they shall be his servants." That right there is the key. The Bible itself says Jerusalem was spared from destruction. Instead of sacking the city, Shishak accepts a massive ransom, all of its treasures. This ransom changes everything. The Bubastite portal is a list of cities that were conquered, besieged, and defeated by military force. If Jerusalem surrendered and paid a colossal tribute without a fight, it technically was not conquered in the same way. The pharaoh got his money, but from a propaganda standpoint, listing a city that paid you off is a lot less glorious than listing one you crushed with your army. This ransom theory perfectly lines up the two records. But is there any proof? The answer might lie with Shoshenq's own son, Pharaoh Osorkon III's. Inscriptions from Osorkon's reign, just a few years after the campaign, show him donating jaw-dropping amounts of gold and silver to Egypt's temples. We are talking about a fortune, over 380 tons of precious metals, mostly silver. The sheer scale of this wealth is staggering, and historians have always wondered, where did Egypt suddenly get all that treasure? The most logical source for this immense and sudden windfall is his father's campaign in the Levant. The timing is perfect. Shoshenq raids the region, dies shortly after, and his son inherits unprecedented wealth to splash around. It is incredibly likely that the treasures Osorkon was gifting to the gods of Egypt were the very same treasures stripped from Solomon's temple just a few years earlier. The gold was not lost, it was relocated, becoming the foundation for the next pharaoh's legacy. So what's the real story behind the Bible's greatest heist? All the evidence points to the biblical account and the Egyptian record not being in conflict at all, but just being two sides of the same story. Pharaoh Shoshenq I really did invade, just like the Bible says. We have his campaign carved on the walls of Karnak and confirmed by discoveries like the Megiddo Stele. The Bible says Jerusalem was looted but not destroyed, which gives us a perfect reason for it to be missing from Shoshenq's list of cities he conquered by force. And the enormous fortune that suddenly flooded into Egypt right after the campaign feels like a stunning, if indirect, receipt for Solomon's lost treasures. The story of Shishak's raid shows how history is often a puzzle. You have a written story, a piece of royal propaganda, and clues scattered in the dirt. No single piece tells you everything. But when you put them all together, a clear and compelling picture emerges. It's a picture of a biblical event backed up by archaeology, a mystery where the solution was hidden, not in what was there, but in what was missing, and why. The heist did not stump archaeologists forever. It just made them look for a different kind of clue. Not a record of destruction, but the trail of the treasure itself. What do you think? Does the lack of a name on a wall invalidate the story, or is the combination of tribute and treasure the most logical solution to this ancient mystery? Let us know in the comments below.